The Real Bio Protocol BPC-157. The banned peptide Big Pharma is terrified of full protocol. ****. Welcome back to the Real Bio Protocol. Cold open ****. And just like that, it vanished from the shelves. One day you could buy it legally. The next? Gone. Scrubbed from every supplement store in America. The FDA didn't issue a press release. There was no public announcement. They just removed it. Quietly. Efficiently. Like it never existed. But here's what they didn't count on. 147 peer-reviewed studies. Published across international journals. Documenting something that shouldn't be possible. A compound that repairs tendons in half the time. That heals gut linings destroyed by years of NSAIDs. That regenerates muscle tissue, protects the brain, and reverses damage from injuries that doctors said would never fully heal. This isn't some underground supplement cooked up in a bathtub. This is a peptide sequence that your own body produces. They found it in human gastric juice. Your stomach makes this compound naturally. And when scientists isolated it, concentrated it, and tested it, the results were so remarkable that Big Pharma had a choice to make. Let people access the most powerful healing compound ever discovered? Or bury it? You already know which option they chose. This is the story of BPC-157. The peptide they don't want you knowing exists. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why they're terrified of it. ACT1. The problem ***. Let me paint you a picture of modern medicine's approach to healing. You tear a tendon. The doctor tells you to rest, ice it, maybe do some physical therapy. 6 months later, you're still at 70%. A year later, it still aches when it rains. They might offer you a cortisone shot, which, by the way, actually degrades tissue over time, or surgery that comes with its own cascade of complications. You develop gut issues from years of taking ibuprofen for your chronic pain. The NSAIDs that were supposed to help your joints have now destroyed your stomach lining. So they give you proton pump inhibitors, which deplete your magnesium, which causes more muscle cramps, which sends you back for more pain medication. It's a beautiful cycle. If you're a pharmaceutical company, here's what the medical establishment doesn't tell you. Your body already has the blueprint for rapid healing. It's encoded in your DNA. Your cells know how to regenerate tissue at remarkable speeds. So why don't they? Because the healing cascade gets interrupted. Inflammation spirals out of control. Blood vessel formation can't keep up with tissue demand. The cellular signals get scrambled. And instead of clean, functional tissue, you get scar tissue. Adhesions. Permanent damage. The standard medical model treats symptoms. Pain? Here's an opioid. Inflammation? Here's a steroid. Torn tissue? Here's a knife. What they never address is the fundamental signaling problem that's preventing your body from doing what it already knows how to do. And this is where it gets infuriating. Because while you're being told that some injuries just don't heal completely, and you'll have to learn to live with it, there's a compound sitting in research databases around the world that's been shown to accelerate tendon healing by up to twice the normal rate. That's been documented to protect and repair the gut lining. That promotes angiogenesis, the formation of new blood vessels, exactly where damaged tissue needs it most. This compound isn't some exotic chemical from a rainforest. It isn't synthesized in a lab from toxic precursors. It's a sequence of 15 amino acids found naturally in human gastric juice. Your body literally produces this molecule right now as you're watching this video. But you can't buy it. Not legally. Not anymore. The peptide industry was generating billions of dollars in research and therapeutic applications. People were healing injuries that had plagued them for decades. Athletes were recovering from career-ending damage. Chronic gut conditions that had resisted every pharmaceutical intervention were resolving in weeks. And then the FDA stepped in. Not with published data showing harm. Not with documented cases of adverse effects. They simply reclassified peptides and removed them from the market under the guise of consumer protection. Protection from what, exactly? From healing too effectively? Follow the money. The chronic pain market is worth over $100 billion annually. The gut health pharmaceutical industry generates $80 billion per year. What happens to those numbers when people discover they can actually heal instead of just managing symptoms forever? The industry doesn't want you healthy. They want you dependent. ACT2. The hidden truth *. Let's talk about what the research actually shows. Because this is where the story gets impossible to ignore. BPC-157 stands for Body Protection Compound, and it was first isolated from human gastric juice by researchers in Yugoslavia in the early 1990s. Dr. Predrag Sikiric and his team at the University of Zagreb didn't set out to discover a miracle healing compound. They were studying the protective factors in gastric fluid that prevent the stomach from digesting itself. What they found changed everything. This 15-amino acid peptide demonstrated healing properties that defied conventional understanding. In study after study, BPC-157 showed an almost unprecedented ability to accelerate tissue repair across multiple systems. We're not talking about marginal improvements. We're talking about effects that made researchers question their own data. A 1997 study published in the Journal of Physiology Paris examined BPC-157's effects on transected rat Achilles tendons. Complete surgical cuts through the tendon tissue. The results? Tendons treated with BPC-157 showed significantly accelerated healing compared to controls. The tensile strength returned faster. The structural organization of the collagen was superior. The treated tendons weren't just healing faster, they were healing better. But tendons were just the beginning. A 2010 study in the Journal of Orthopedic Research looked at muscle healing. Researchers crushed rat muscles and then administered BPC-157. The treated groups showed dramatically faster recovery of muscle function. The inflammatory response was modulated, not suppressed, but optimized. The formation of new muscle fibers was enhanced. Then came the gut studies. And this is where things get really interesting. Researchers discovered that BPC-157 demonstrated what they called cytoprotective effects on the gastrointestinal lining. It protected against damage from alcohol, NSAIDs, and other gut-destroying agents. But more remarkably, it also promoted healing of existing damage. Ulcers that had resisted conventional treatment showed significant improvement with BPC-157 administration. A 2016 paper in Current Pharmaceutical Design reviewed the compound's effects on inflammatory bowel conditions. The mechanism wasn't just anti-inflammatory in the traditional sense. BPC-157 appeared to modulate the entire inflammatory cascade, promoting the right kind of healing response rather than simply shutting down inflammation indiscriminately like steroids do. And here's what really caught researchers' attention. BPC-157 seemed to work systemically, regardless of how it was administered. Oral, subcutaneous, intramuscular, local injection, the effects were consistent. This suggested a fundamental mechanism of action that went deeper than simple local tissue repair. Studies began emerging from research groups around the world. Liver protection, nerve healing, cardiac tissue repair. The compound appeared to act on multiple pathways simultaneously, coordinating healing responses across different tissue types. A 2018 study examined BPC-157's effects on traumatic brain injury in rats. The results showed reduced brain swelling, improved neurological outcomes, and accelerated recovery. This wasn't supposed to be possible. Brain tissue doesn't regenerate like other tissues. Except, apparently, when you give it the right signals. The cumulative evidence across 147 published studies painted a picture that was almost too good to be true. A natural compound, found in human tissue, with virtually no documented toxicity, that accelerated healing across multiple organ systems. So what happened? ACT3. The mechanism * to understand why BPC-157 works, you need to understand what actually happens when tissue gets damaged. When you tear a tendon, crush a muscle, or damage your gut lining, your body initiates a healing cascade. This cascade has 3 overlapping phases: inflammation, proliferation, and remodeling. Each phase depends on specific cellular signals. When those signals are optimized, healing happens efficiently. When they're disrupted by chronic disease, aging, poor nutrition, or pharmaceutical interference, healing stalls or goes wrong. BPC-157 appears to act as a master regulator of this healing cascade. First, let's talk about blood vessels. Healing tissue needs oxygen and nutrients, which means it needs blood supply. The formation of new blood vessels is called angiogenesis, and it's controlled by a complex interplay of growth factors. VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor, is one of the key players. Studies have shown that BPC-157 upregulates VEGF expression in healing tissues. But here's what makes it different from simply injecting VEGF directly. BPC-157 promotes angiogenesis in a targeted, organized manner. The new blood vessels form where they're needed, in patterns that support functional tissue rather than chaotic scar formation. Second, BPC-157 modulates the nitric oxide system. Nitric oxide is a signaling molecule involved in blood vessel dilation, immune function, and cellular communication. The body has 2 main enzymes that produce nitric oxide: eNOS, which produces beneficial nitric oxide, and iNOS, which produces nitric oxide associated with inflammation and tissue damage. Research suggests that BPC-157 promotes eNOS activity while moderating iNOS activity. This shifts the healing environment toward repair rather than continued damage. It's not simply anti-inflammatory, it's pro-healing in a specific, targeted way. Third, there's the growth hormone secretagogue receptor pathway. Some research indicates that BPC-157 interacts with this system, potentially explaining its systemic effects. The growth hormone axis is fundamental to tissue repair and regeneration throughout the body. By modulating this pathway, BPC-157 may be signaling the body to enter a systemic healing state. Fourth, and this is crucial for gut healing, BPC-157 appears to enhance the expression of tight junction proteins in the intestinal lining. Your gut lining is only 1 cell thick in most places. Those cells are held together by tight junctions, protein complexes that control what passes through the barrier. When tight junctions fail, you get increased intestinal permeability. Leaky gut. BPC-157 has been shown to increase expression of proteins like JAM1 and ZO1, which are critical components of tight junctions. This explains why the compound is so effective for gut healing. It's literally helping rebuild the barrier at the molecular level. Fifth, there's the neurotransmitter connection. Studies have shown that BPC-157 affects the dopamine system, the serotonin system, and the GABA system. This may explain reported effects on mood and cognition, as well as the compound's neuroprotective properties. The gut-brain axis is increasingly recognized as a critical health pathway, and a compound that affects both gut integrity and neurotransmitter function sits right at the center of this connection. The aggregate picture is remarkable. BPC-157 doesn't just do one thing. It appears to coordinate multiple healing pathways simultaneously, shifting the body's entire repair machinery into a higher gear. This is why damaged tissues heal faster. This is why tendons regain their strength. This is why gut linings rebuild instead of remaining chronically inflamed. The compound isn't forcing anything unnatural. It's amplifying what your body already knows how to do. ACT4, real-world application *. So what does this mean for you practically? First, let's be clear about the current legal landscape. In the United States, the FDA has cracked down on peptide sales, and BPC-157 is no longer available through most legitimate supplement channels. This doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Researchers still use it. International suppliers still produce it. But the days of buying it easily from domestic peptide companies are largely over. If you're exploring this compound, you need to understand what you're dealing with. The research literature describes several administration routes. Subcutaneous injection near the site of injury has been the most common method in animal studies. The typical research dose ranges from 1 to 10 micrograms per kilogram of body weight. For a 200-pound person, this translates to roughly 90 to 900 micrograms per dose. Most human protocols that have been discussed in the biohacking community use doses in the 250 to 500 microgram range, administered once or twice daily. Duration of use typically ranges from 4 to 12 weeks depending on the condition being addressed. Oral administration has also been studied, particularly for gut-related applications. The compound appears to survive gastric acid, which makes sense, given that it was originally isolated from gastric juice. Research suggests that oral BPC-157 has systemic effects, not just local gut effects, though some practitioners prefer injection for musculoskeletal applications. Here's what the anecdotal reports consistently describe. For tendon and ligament injuries, users often report noticeable improvement in pain and function within the first 1 to 2 weeks. Full resolution of chronic injuries may take 6 to 12 weeks of consistent use. The compound appears most effective when combined with appropriate rehabilitation. It accelerates healing, but you still need to rebuild strength and function through proper loading. For gut healing, many users report significant improvement in symptoms within 4 to 8 weeks. Those dealing with NSAID-induced damage, chronic gastritis, or increased intestinal permeability often describe improvements in digestion, reduced bloating, and resolution of food sensitivities. For post-surgical recovery, some users have reported dramatically accelerated healing times. Incisions healing faster than expected. Range of motion returning sooner. Less scar tissue formation. This aligns with the research showing improved wound healing and collagen organization. What about combining BPC-157 with other compounds? The research literature has explored combinations with TB500, another peptide with healing properties, as well as growth hormone secretagogues. Some practitioners report synergistic effects, particularly for severe or chronic injuries. However, the evidence base for specific combinations is less robust than for BPC-157 alone. What are the reported side effects? In the clinical research, BPC-157 has shown remarkably low toxicity. Animal studies have used doses far exceeding what humans would take with no significant adverse effects. Anecdotal reports from human users are similarly reassuring. Most describe either no side effects or mild, transient effects like injection site irritation. However, let me be clear. This compound has not completed human clinical trials. The long-term effects of repeated use in humans are not definitively established. Anyone exploring this territory is making an individual risk-benefit calculation with incomplete information. ACT5. The bigger picture asterisk. Here's what you need to understand about what's happening right now. We're living through a moment where the gap between what's possible and what's permitted has never been wider. The research exists, the mechanisms are understood, the safety profile appears favorable. And yet, access is being systematically restricted. Ask yourself, who benefits from this situation? Not the former athlete whose career ended because a tendon injury never fully healed. Not the person whose gut was destroyed by a decade of NSAIDs prescribed by their doctor. Not the aging population watching their regenerative capacity decline year after year while being offered nothing but symptom management. The beneficiaries are the industries built on chronic disease. The pharmaceutical companies selling pain medication for injuries that never heal. The supplement companies selling questionable alternatives now that effective compounds are banned. The medical system that profits from repeat visits and escalating interventions. You were supposed to accept this. You were supposed to believe that some injuries don't heal, that aging means inevitable decline, that chronic conditions are just part of life. You were supposed to stay sick enough to keep paying but never well enough to stop. But information wants to be free. And the more they try to suppress this knowledge, the more people seek it out. The research on BPC-157 isn't hidden in some classified database. It's published in peer-reviewed journals. Anyone can read it. Anyone can understand it. The science is not controversial. The only controversy is about access. We're not telling you what to do. That's not our role. We're telling you what exists. What's been studied. What the data shows. What you do with that information is your decision. But you deserve to make that decision with full knowledge of what's possible. Not the watered-down, industry-approved version of health where your only options are the ones that keep you dependent on the system. The real version. The version based on what human biology is actually capable of when you stop interfering with it and start supporting it. Your body knows how to heal. It's encoded in your DNA. Expressed in compounds like BPC-157 that your own stomach produces naturally. The machinery is there. The blueprint exists. The question is whether you'll ever be allowed to use it. The science is out there. They just don't want you finding it. That's why we're here. This is the real bio protocol.